I am delighted. Yes, ma'am. I am delighted to introduce to you our guest presenter tonight, Dr. Tony Kinkel. Since 2021, he's been the Vice President of Development at Mount Dora Christian Academy and Children's Home. As you will quickly discern when you hear him, he was born and raised in northern Minnesota, and he is a lifelong member of the Church of Christ. Mela is with him tonight, right there. They have two sons. Brett, married, lives in Kansas City with his wife Lauren, and Tony and Melvin's grandchildren. They have a youngest son, Kellen, who just graduated from college last year, works for IBM in Minnesota. Prior to coming to Mount Dora, Tony served as a community college faculty member, academic dean, 13 years as community and technical college president, the executive director of the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, most recently executive director of the Minnesota State Board of School Administrators. He may or may not want you to know that he even spent time as a state legislator in the state of Minnesota. This is not part of his bio, but I will tell you that Tony here is an accomplished man of God, and you have heard a very impressive pedigree. There's a lot of things that Tony and Melvin could be doing in this season of their lives. And they have chosen to invest this season in Mount Dora. And I think that tells you a lot about them. And I think it tells you a lot about Mount Dora. So we look forward to hearing from you tonight, brother.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. Sandy, good to see you again. I am a recovering politician. I tried to leave that off the Bible. He added that. Elva and I are so happy to be here and just listening to all the prayers. Life is tough. As you said, sir, it's coming at us. And I just hope tonight you've taken time to come. We're honored to drive up. We just hope we can share some things tonight that will help. Because I'll tell you what, this church is helping an awful lot of kids. In fact, you're known, let me see if I know how to do this, as the shoe church. We have 212 churches that support our kids at Mount Dora Children's Home over 5 different states. And this church is unique and you sponsor and donate a lot of money. But in addition, and you probably, I'll get out of the way here, you probably recognize those packages. And we're so honored that you do that. You know, our kids wear uniforms. And they're very poor. But these shoes, you know, those of you that have young children or had young children, if you're wearing uniforms, everybody's equal, but those shoes stick out. And I'm not one for designer shoes, but to have shoes that don't make those kids feel less fortunate. Because at the academy, it's $14,000 a kid. So these children from the children's home are in with the doctor's kids and the lawyer's kids and the politicians' kids and college president kids. So this really helps. Thank you so much. I have to share an experience that just happened to me. I shouldn't say just Mel, but we were in the car. It was maybe a couple months ago, I think. Mel and I are driving to Nashville. We do a big dinner in Nashville. And the phone came over. I had it on the loudspeaker. And I'm going to tell you, I'm still, I'm nervous about what happened, what I heard. It's made an impact on me. And I want to share it with you tonight. This woman calls. And all I remember is she was from the Jacksonville area. I don't remember her name. I don't remember what church she went to. It's really weird. I don't remember. I can still hear her voice. And she calls, she's Dr. Kinkel, do you still, this is so-and-so, do you still take automobiles? Can we still donate an automobile? And I said, yes, sure. And there's a number of questions we have to ask before we accept it. You know, does the air conditioning work? Do you drive it now? But there was something about her voice that was angelic. And so we got all done and, and I asked questions to make sure she's legitimate, and she was. And then I said at the end, I said, why do you want to donate the car? And she said, well, I just died. And I'm thinking, no, I look over at Melva. We're in the car. She sounded totally sane. I mean, she said, yeah, I just had I died on the operating table. And I came back. And I mean, really legitimate. And you see books and TV shows and all this. And so I said, well, can you tell me about that experience? And she said, and Melba, I hope I captured this. If I forget something, let me know. She said, I had a heart issue and I went in for an operation and my heart stopped. And she said, of course, I was out under anesthesia. I was out cold. And she said, I saw myself leaving my body. And she said, someone was behind me and they wrapped their arms around me and they lifted me up and we were going up. And she said, I couldn't look back, but she said, I think it was Jesus. And she said, and I'm like, she's really telling this, and I'm like almost shaking. I'm listening so intently to this. And she said, you ever see those movies of hurricanes or tornadoes that come in and it's coming towards a home and the shingles are flying off and it's just, and all that's left is the foundation. She said that was happening. This, what I think was Jesus was carrying me and all this stuff in my life was flying off. And she said, it was so bright. She said it was so bright and she said, I could not look, I could only look from about here down, from that table down. And she said, but I did look to the left and I saw my mom and dad and grandparents and my brother who had all passed away. And she said, I saw them over there. And she said, we couldn't speak. We didn't have, but we communicated telepathically. She said, I didn't have a mouth, but I could hear my father saying, oh my goodness, that's, and I can't remember her name now, but that's, oh my goodness, she's there. Oh, so good to see you, please. And she said, I could tell that, there was that I couldn't get over to them. There was like a gulf there. And she said, I communicated, oh, it's so good to see you. I want to be with you. And she said, but I was still being carried and I could see a throne. And she said, at the bottom of the throne, there was these little children and they were playing all over the throne. And she said, I couldn't look up. It was so bright, but I could see a big ornate table. And she said, on that table was a book. And the Jesus, in my perception, Jesus holding me says to this bright light on the throne, may she come in. And Mel and I are like listening to this. I mean, we're driving through Georgia somewhere, listening to this, and it is completely mesmerizing us. And she says that the voice said, no, she must go back. And she says, I remember saying, please, please, Lord, please, I want to see my parents. I don't want to go back. I want to be with them. And she said, the voice said, you must go back. And she said, at that point, I remember who I think is Jesus bringing me back. And she said, I'm coming back in and I see the doctors and there's a flat line on the heart screen. And she said, I could hear them talking and I saw exactly what they were wearing. And I would have never known that because I was out cold before I went in. And she said, and I felt myself coming back in my body. And afterwards I told this story and people didn't believe me. And I said, well, this is what they were wearing. And they said, oh my goodness, how'd you know that? And sometimes I think that was an angel talking to me. I still don't know who this is that called us on the phone. And I want to just say, when she mentioned the book, maybe Mike preaches more on Judgment Day. I haven't heard a lot of sermons on that. And it made me think, and I got to confess to you tonight, scared me a little bit. Because that book has our lives in there, my life in there. And if I may be totally honest, there are some things written in that book I wish wasn't there. Maybe I'm the only one in the room like that. And I wonder hearing that story from this person I still have never met, don't know. It got me to think. She said, look, I'm not selling this to movie rights. I'm not right. She said, I just share this testimony with special people that I think might influence others. And I wonder what went through my mind when that book was there is have I done enough? Have I given of my talents enough? And there was some reflection there. I saw this on Facebook. Somebody wrote this. I don't know what it is, but it says, in your new life, you will only need your spirit. When you live a life of love for others, you're amassing your spiritual fortune, and that's the only one you will take with you. That's why to try to live fully and be happy while you're here, because from here, you won't take what you have. You will only take what you gave. Now that's my youngest son, Kelly. He's 23, but he was 22 last year. Got his first job at IBM. We finally got him through college. I think it was Melville, 1 week or 2 weeks on the job. Midnight, he calls and says, Dad, I'm not, and I'm in Florida, he's in Minnesota. Dad, I'm not feeling very well. You're right there in Rochester, Minnesota. Tomorrow, go into the Mayo Clinic. They'll check you out. He said, okay, all right. 2 hours later, he called, Dad, I'm throwing up and I haven't had anything to eat in 2 days. And I'm just throwing up this stuff. And I'm really not feeling well. I said, Kellen, get into the Mayo, get in tonight. You're going to have to go in and let him check you out. He goes in and his appendix was ruptured. He was not septic. So they went in, he called back, said, hey, look, they're going to have to do emergency surgery. I'm like, when it's your youngest son, that's tough. I think he's only been in the hospital once in his entire life at age 5. Healthy, strapping young man. And He said, look, I said, do I need to get on a plane right now and get up there? He said, no, doc, I'm not septic. It's kind of routine. They'll just remove the appendix. I'm going to have the operation in the morning and I'll call you. We'll call you as soon as it's done. 8 o'clock the next morning, the phone rings and it's the doctor at the Mayo Clinic. And he says the words you never want to hear. There have been complications. I said, doctor, and evidently they told him I was a doctor, although not a medical doctor, but I think he thought I was. Because he says, well, Dr. Kinkel, and he starts going off on exactly what happened. And essentially happened, they didn't give him enough anesthesia, which at the Mayo Clinic, to make this kind of mistake is very rare. And he came out of it too early and he was intubated. And I don't want to gross you out, but he then inhaled all this stuff, got in his lungs and put him in heart failure. And I'm listening to this going, what in the world? I go from, he's perfectly normal and 12 hours later, he's fighting for his life. Doctor says, I think you need to get up here. And so I got on that plane and it was 5 hours by the time we get connected and I drive from the Twin Cities down to Rochester. And I don't know when I get off that plane if he's going to be alive or dead. When I'm going to talk to you tonight about children. But when it's your child in need, everything else stops. You can have my career. You can have every penny I have. Take my land, my car, God, everything that I thought was so important. Have it all. If you'll just say it. Fortunately for us, the good Lord blessed us and he recovered. What I want to share with you tonight is when it's our own children. But as Christians, we're called to a little higher standard. See, anybody can help their own kids. It's when it's somebody else's child. That's what Christians are called to do. And that's what we do at Mount Dora Children's Home. Because of 212 churches like you across 5 states, you're giving a lot of kids meaning and hope. And I listened to your prayer today, all those challenges, and I was thinking, listening, some of our kids have every one of those together. In fact, I think about this story about the Good Samaritan. Man was going down to Jerusalem from Jericho and he was attacked by robbers. You've seen this story in Luke. They stripped him, attacked him, left him for dead. Now this is interesting. And a priest happened to be going down the same road. And when he saw the man, he passed on the other side. Now this isn't like I didn't notice. It's like I see you laying in the ditch and I'm like this. And then a Levite. What's the significance of a Levite, by the way? They were right the priesthood, right? One was a priest, the other was a Levite. So they're all kind of in that same circle. And he did the same thing. He passed by on the other side. This whole thing with the judgment book and everything, I started thinking, Lord, how many people have I passed by? Maybe I didn't even notice. I plead guilty. I don't know, but my wife, we see folks on the highway, you see them too. And you want to help, but there's a part of you that says, oh, they might use it for drugs or booze. So I give my wife credit. What she does now is she puts together a care package thing and we hand them the whole thing. So it's good stuff. If there's a will, there's a way around that stuff. Interesting story about the feeding of the 5,000. By the way, it was not 5,000.
Anymore.
It was 5,000 men, right? You guys are ahead of me. Mike, it's probably closer to 7,000 or 8,000. And then if you factor in kids. And Jesus at this time on this deal, and the crowd swelled and thought, guess what he's just gone through? You remember, John the Baptist, they just told him his cousin, they think it's Jesus, was beheaded. He's probably the most depressed he's been in his young life at that moment. And he just wants to get away from the crowds. And what do? They follow him. They follow him. He saw the huge crowd. There's an interesting artist rendering of it right there. He stepped from the boat and he had compassion on them and he healed their sick. See, unlike the Levite and the priest who saw and ducked, Jesus saw and had compassion. You know, interesting debate about, we talk about this. Can you teach compassion? I mean, can you take Christians and teach them to have compassion? Now that's an interesting, is it just like a part of what's inside of you and you learn from your parents and, or is it a learned trait? I'll leave that up to you to think about that. But all I know is this, Jesus had compassion. We can't help a single child at Mount Dora Children's Home without people having compassion. See, if it's my kid, Kellen, I'm going to have an awful lot of compassion. But we're called to be deeper, I think. When Jesus looked up and saw the great crowd coming towards him, he says to Philip, one of the apostles, right? He says, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? Now, this is interesting. He asked this to test him. You noticed that before? For he had already in his mind what he was going to do. What's he testing him on? What's the test? Jesus asked Philip. He turned to Philip. There was a purpose to that because he was testing him. What's he testing him on?
Faith. Faith.
Faith. Faith. Wonder why he picked Philip. The Bible doesn't tell us. I bet Jesus just didn't spin the bottle and it landed on Philip. There had to have been something there. Philip then says, it would take more than a half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Now, right, 7,000, 8,000 people, they can get one bite. That's going to take. That's probably didn't give Jesus a lot of confidence there in that answer. Another of his disciples, Andrew, now this is Peter's, Peter the Rock, right? His brother chimes in and says, we have a boy here with, there's the 2 fish and the barley. I tried to find a picture of it. You see it right there. I've been to Israel and I've been on the Sea of Galilee. And you go to a restaurant, some of you may have been to Israel, and you can get that Sea of Galilee fish. I have. I don't know what it is, if it's a crappie or but it was good. Good. So, and it looked a lot like that right there. He says there's a book, by the way, of all the accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I believe this account is the only one that mentions the boy. All the others say the apostles found the fish. But it came from that little boy. That little boy. the boys you're helping, you don't know when they're going to be there when they're needed the most. There's a little boy who had those fish. We gave them to Jesus. We don't know how old he was. We don't even know his name. Little boy. Jesus healed and he fed. He saw, had compassion, he healed, and he fed. Now I want to talk about Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, is that a Bible name? Zacchaeus? Who am I thinking of? No, Zacchaeus. There we go.
Zacchaeus.
Yeah. Zacchaeus is the young African-American woman. That's her son right there. She landed at Mount Dora with the change in her pocket from Miami. She didn't know her father. Her mother was dead. She talks about dodging bullets in her neighborhood. Now, I got to tell you, I grew up Church of Christ. My parents went, my grandparents went, my aunts and uncles went. I bet I'm not alone to say that I was spoiled spiritually. I can't imagine going through bullet holes in the neighborhood just to get to school. She landed with a GED, and that's her little son there. And because of you and your church, she went on to graduate summa cum laude from Lake Sumter Lake Sumter College. She's working full-time. Her son still goes to Mount Dora. He's a drummer, wonderful musician. And she had nothing but the change in her pocket when she got off the bus at Mount Dora 4 years ago. Because of you. Rebecca Cox. She was in 55, that's a 50 foster homes before she was in kindergarten. How do you, that's what, do the math there. What is that? One every month? She told me, she tells this story at our big dinner. In fact, you might have heard the story at Jacksonville. She says, I'm with the 38th different foster home, and I'm watching the Orlando news. And come over the news, I see my mother shot to death in a drug deal on the nightly news. That's how she found out. She was 10. Rebecca made some poor choices in her life. You know, many of the folks we help have made poor choices. Some of our brethren hide behind that a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you. But they got themselves in that trouble. What are we helping them for? Only Jesus would say that. And she had gotten married and had children, married an abusive alcoholic father. He left. And very violent. And she tells this story about her son. And they didn't have enough money for beds, so they had to sleep on the floor, sleeping bags. And she said, in the pillow underneath the sleeping bag, my husband, ex-husband, would get drunk and come in and start to physically beat me up. And she said, my youngest son, oldest son, who was only 11, was not physically strong enough to fight him off. So he put a knife under that pillow. And she said, and after 6 months of being at Mount Dora Children's Home, he said he replaced that. She said he replaced that knife with the Bible. You guys have made that possible. Your shoe dry your congregation donating, many of you individually in this church donate to these people. Claudia, she's now a sophomore at Faulkner University running cross country. Her parents said they couldn't handle her. They literally brought her to our doorstep. Wonderful, wonderful child. Graduated with honors. And we couldn't get her parents to come to the graduation party. Mel and I hosted it in our home. And we're like, how does a parent not come? See, I was spoiled. I don't get that world. And she, because of your help, became a straight A student. For the first time in her life, had stability in a home with our house parent. All of our children and single parents are required to go to church every Sunday with their children. They're required to take a Bible class in school and go to chapel every day. Where our world could use more of that, couldn't it? They're required to take a parenting class once a week, 2 hours, where these single mothers are learning about, what if my car breaks down? What do I look for? All things we learn from our own folks. What does taxes mean? What does insurance mean? How do I get rid of these devices so my kids sleep at night instead of staying up on those stupid devices? How to parent better. That's what you all provide. They get those services, and those children, like her, are scholarship to go to a world-class Christian academy for free. See, none of these children could have darkened the door at Mount Miller Christian Academy on their own, would have never had the resources. But her life has changed forever. She wants to go into helping other kids. Rebecca Cox, the earlier one, she's already working in Lake County. She's helping people coming out of prison to transition back into Main Street. What better person to understand that than somebody like Rebecca? We love these kids. You'd be proud of the investment that you're making in these kids. Josh Young said, I used to watch you from the back of the church, and that's how I learned how families treated each other. You know, in your church, and you've got a beautiful ornate church and a stellar minister who keeps everybody up every Sunday. And there are people in your church that are watching you from behind. They're watching how you men put your arm around and respect your wife. For Josh, he'd never seen that before till his friend invited him to the church where we go at Orange Avenue in Eustis. His father abandoned him. Mother moved from New York to Florida. She couldn't really handle him. And so he went, and he said, because she kept having men in all the time and there were all kinds of fights. That's hard, by the way, that's hard on a young man when he sees mom with a lot of boyfriends. That's tough, especially when they're violent. And he said, I went to live with my uncle. That's the good news. The bad news is my uncle was the biggest drug dealer in Lake County. He said, I used to come home and there would be a wad of cash this thick on the dining room table. And he said, I'd watch my uncle and he had power. All these people in Lake County, some officials, would come and get their drugs from him. And he had that wad of money. And I said, Josh, how does someone like you seeing a wad of money and all that power not go down that same road? Can you imagine you're an adolescent boy and you see that? And he said, because my friend brought me to church and I sat in the back of the church and I started to notice how all of you behaved. and how you sang and how you prayed and how you loved, how you respected. And he said, that's it. That's how I learned how real people live. He came to Mount Dora, graduated with honors. He's currently teaches at a magnet school in Montgomery, Alabama. He's a soccer coach, a highly ranked magnet school in Montgomery, Alabama, changing lives himself. See, all of these folks you're helping are changing lives now themselves. We love Josh. Now, you've been a leadership church for 20 years. I looked up the data. You've given $14,000 over the lifetime of your congregation. And, I'm only able to get to a few special churches every year, but I wanted to come tonight for you and tell you, you are making an impact for Jesus Christ in this world. And I know you go beyond your own kids. That's easy. You've embraced that higher calling. 1,600 children since 1945 have been impacted by our residential program. Back when Brother Boyd started it, the big issue was poverty, and they lived way out in the country. They needed a place to stay so they could get a Christian education. And boy, has it morphed into trying to address society's problems so these kids even have a chance to read the Bible in peace. I wonder what Brother Boyd would think today. I think he'd be proud. But the problems are so much more immense than ever with the world that we live in. We think we're making a difference. Every dollar that this church has donated goes to three areas. First, about 53% goes to the physical and emotional well-being of that child. We provide the Christian house parents, wonderful people. They have 3-4 children of their own. By the way, they're on call 24/7. Right? When you're a house parent, it's a 24/7 job. It's hard to find house parents. We don't pay what we should. They do get free lodging, but they have their own family to take care of, and then 24/7, all these other children. We pay for the oversight, supervision, food, insurance, medical care, childcare, transportation, and other activities. 36% go to church activities, first and foremost. All the expenses related to church, to the church camps, to the Central Florida Bible Camp, to the Lads to Leaders, and what are you with?
Lads to Leaders, yeah.
Yeah. I know you're involved with a lot of that, Mike. We pay for all that. We think exposing these children to other Christian kids are the best thing we can do. See, they do watch us. They do watch us. And then 11% is the maintenance. And many of you have been to Mount Dora. You've seen the dormitory, the house parent home that we have, Thompson House. And then all the cottages, the 9 cottages for these single mothers. We take care of 9 families now and 30 children on the single parent side. And then we've got children's home where they're emancipated from their parents and they're over with our house parents. We like to keep families together. You know, in the olden days, we tried to put everybody in the children's home. But today, what we're trying to do is, we can do that, and then that child goes back into that dysfunctional home. By focusing on the mother too, we impact the entire ecosystem of that child. So it's not just the child getting the help, but mom does too. And that unit is helped in its entirety. That's what we do. I want to just close. First of all, saying we always give preference to Church of Christ members. We will find a home. If you have a relative of yours that's struggling. Or children that if you make the request, we consider it part of the Church of Christ family. You will always give priority. We do accept all denominations, but only after we satisfy Church of Christ families first. So if you know of anyone, please refer them to us. We would love to help. I'll close with this. One of the most difficult things that Melvin and I do is deal with us people who pass away. The largest source of revenue for Mount Dora Children's Home are people who put us in their wills or trusts. Right now, we're up to 125 people who have put us in their will. And when they pass, we get those resources. In fact, we just had a woman class of 1968, alumni of Mount Dora, passed away. She was a librarian in Orange County, never married, no children, and she passed. Her entire estate is coming to us. But what's really hard is when Mel and I go to that home, and most of the time we don't know this person. We've never met them. And gentleman passed away last year in Orlando. He was really big with General Dynamics, engineer, traveled all over the world. We walked into the home and he's got these plaques all over the wall. Been all over the world recognized. Pictures of his family. There's his wife and his two daughters, or his daughter and his son. All the things you guys have right now in your home, he had. And unfortunately for him, his two children passed away before he did. Neither of those children were married. He had no grandchildren. He literally had one person left in the world who he was related to, a 92-year-old brother in Ohio who couldn't get down to see him. He was utterly, totally, completely alone, and he died. And we go into his home and we're like strangers, and here we are, we're going, and we see all these plaques and pictures of family, and we're thinking, this looks like he had no one. Where did all these people go? And he left his entire estate to us because both his children had come to Mount Dora Christian. And you know, the Bible says everything that we have, all those plaques you have on your wall, all those pictures of your beautiful family and your grandchildren, it's all a mist. It's a vapor. And someone like Melvin and I, for some of us, some stranger's gonna come in your home, pick that stuff apart. We were going through his socks and his private stuff, because we had to get ready for the estate sale. And then the scavengers all come. They know you're having an estate sale, and they show up and they're waiting in line because they want to get the best deal. See, all of his stuff that he worked for, scavengers come in and take it. It's all a mist. But for him, he left that stuff to the children at Mount Dora Children's Home because he wanted to make a difference after he was gone. Thank you to this church. I only visit about 5 a year. You're one of them I wanted to come and see. On behalf of all of us that are trying to help children that are not our own, we thank you for your investment in us. We hope we're good stewards of the 14,000 that you all, and way more when I count the individual donations that you've invested in these children. May we always be good stewards of God's resources. God bless every one of you tonight for coming. And that book is up there on that table, that judgment book is there. Let's put a few more chapters in here together. I think I'm supposed to close with a prayer, Mike, if I may, and then we'll be dismissed. May we bow. Lord, You know the hearts of every single person here tonight. And they've listened and they've thought about and they've maybe questioned and they've thought about their own kids. Every one of the folks here tonight are doing the best they can to follow in your example and bless them. Bless this church. Bless Mike and Sandy who labor every day to help this church get better. Lord, may every dollar that the folks here who give to these children in Mount Dora, may it be used to glorify you, to help these kids have a chance to have a life. Help us to understand how blessed each of us are with the parents and the grandparents we have. Help us to continue to give back. Help us to resist judgment and to just help. Thank you, Lord, for the safe trip Melvin and I had up here. We've been blessed to be here to share this story. Thank you for Mount Dora. Thank you for the folks that started this 80 years ago. And Lord, we know there is a judgment coming. That book is on that table. We know there are things in there we wish there weren't. We made mistakes when we were younger. We just ask for your forgiveness. Thank you, Jesus, for forgiving us of our sins. God bless this group, this church. In your name we pray.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.